everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa Dickens, co-founder of Ella Mulry and board director of the UKPA, and I shall be your weekly host. Each week for 30 minutes, we'll be connecting the VCs, prop tech startups, and real estate professionals globally, and assist in bridging that famous communication gap we all love talking about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of the Propcast. And I thought, who better to kick off the third season than with the wonderful William Newton, President and Managing Director of WiseGold. So welcome, William.
Thanks, Lou, for having me today. Really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Today, we will be talking about William's newly formed Smart Council and Connectivity, and obviously WiseGold, the product. But before we get into sort of that, let me tell you a little bit about William's sort of story. So William began his career at McKinsey & Co. before moving to work as a senior policy advisor in the Cabinet Office, and then in the number 10 policy unit in 10 Downing Street, which we'll hear a little bit more about later. But William joined WiseGold in 2015 ahead of the company's London launch as the capital's official digital connectivity rating scheme in partnership with the Mayor of London. In 5 years, William has successfully led WiseGold's expansion to France, Ireland, Germany, Holland, Australia, and Italy, and is now growing WiseGold's product offering by entering into the smart building space with a brand new certification. WiseGold owns and operates WIDE certification, which is a global digital connectivity rating scheme for buildings. Now, this was first launched in 2013 with the endorsement of New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. To date, WiseGold has certified over 600 million square feet of space across 9 countries, with over 2,500 buildings committed to certification, and I'm sure we have thousands and thousands more to come. WiseGold's mission is to make the world's buildings better connected, enabling a more collaborative, innovative, and dynamic future. And it's imperative that we now turn our attention to smart buildings. So everyone who's listening, I'm sure you have heard of WiseGold, but that's a sort of brief sort of overview. But now I think let's hear a bit more from William about, what was the proper story behind WiseGold? And I guess also, how did you first, get in touch with Ari as well?
Two interesting and slightly different questions. In terms of WiseGold coming into the world, we really owe our existence to Michael Bloomberg while he was the mayor of New York. And it was he who saw the discrepancy between, on the one hand, the enormous and the increasing importance of digital connectivity to businesses. And then on the other hand, the fact that most businesses had no idea how well connected an office building was before they moved in. And in truth, most landlords probably didn't know either. But if they did know, they didn't have a trusted way of articulating that to tenants. And so Bloomberg looked around for someone who could find a solution to those problems. So our founder, Ari, said, yeah, I can take that on as a challenge. And he considered the fact that there were certification schemes for lots of things in real estate, like wellness and like sustainability. But no one had ever rated the thing that actually mattered the most day to day to tenants, which is the internet, which is the lifeblood of modern business. Like the internet determines whether or not you can do your job every single day. And so Ari went back to Bloomberg, suggested the idea of a digital connectivity certification scheme, and Bloomberg, as the mayor of New York, seed funded us into existence.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that. Well, no one really thought of this before. It's something which is just so simple and, like you said, so important and just fundamental to any business or any building, whether it's residential or commercial. So I'm not surprised you've seen sort of such an uptake.
I remember when we first started talking to landlords in the UK, and everyone I explained the idea of WiseGold to didn't say to me like, wow, William, you and Ari are the smartest guys we've ever come across. This is a brilliant idea. Instead, everyone's like, man, this is so obviously needed. But also so obvious, I can't imagine why nobody's done this before. And sometimes the most obvious ideas are the best. It may not be ingenious, but that's because it's so necessary that its requirement is apparent as soon as someone hears it.
Yeah, I think everyone, surely straight when your pitches or when you're sort of opening up the door, there's obviously a clear value proposition there, which really anyone can understand. I speak to a lot of businesses. I'm sure a lot of real estate funds or landlords are constantly being pitched to about these products, but some of them are just a little bit too, I know, we're not quite then getting our head around all of them. Now, I guess we've spoken about WiredScore, but could you give us like a bit more introduction or elaborate on the product? Because I'm sure it's not as simple as we've just made it out to be.
Well, we do try and make sure it's simple without being simpler. So we're not oversimplifying what's happening in the world. But when you think about it, a tenant really cares about four things when they care about the internet. They care about whether or not they can move into a building and get up and running quickly, what kind of price they're going to pay, for what kind of speed they're going to get. They care about whether or not they've got good coverage and capacity on mobile phone signal. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, they care about resilience. They care about the fact that they will have the internet up and running all the time in their office buildings. So we devised a scorecard that reflects those big four inputs and gives a rating, platinum, gold, silver certified, or indeed uncertified for every building that we rate. Now, that can be used by a landlord in a few different ways. Obviously, there's the advantage in terms of leasing and attracting tenants into a space. But more than that, it's a really tool that can help with asset management, either with designing a building in the first place to make sure that it's up to those standards, or improving a building from where it is, looking across an entire portfolio of a landlord's buildings to see the common themes that are coming out. In London at the moment, over 50% of new developments are either already certified by WiredScore or going through the process of certification. And the City of London has put in their draft city plan that all new developments in the square mile will have to be certified. So I think indicative of the fact that this isn't a problem that's going away. This is something that's useful now and is going to be even more important in the future.
So obviously there's been a huge amount of sort of uptake. Has there been any resistance maybe in like certain like regions or areas or countries where obviously New York, London, massive uptake as you just sort of demonstrated, but do you have sort of any obstacles or any sort of people who are like, you know what, we're not sort of quite ready for this yet?
We definitely see an adoption curve. So Manhattan's at 33% of the total square footage being certified by WiredScore, but that only happens after sort of 5 or so years. So each market that you move into, you'll have the early adopters, the people who say like, yes, we understand why this is important and we want to get involved early. So you see buildings like Derwent's White Collar Factory was the first Wired certified platinum development in Europe because Derwent immediately understood the idea and they wanted to get involved. Similarly, British Land were the first group who just decided they were going to commit their entire pipeline to it. So you get those early adopters, and then there's a good chunk of fast followers later on.
And I think the moment we've all been waiting for, you've recently formed a smart council, which I'm sure everyone's been sort of reading about or just following. Can you elaborate a little bit more? What does a smart council consist of? What will the council sort of bring? How have you sort of formed it? I'd love to learn a little bit more about it.
Of course. Well, for the last few years, we've stayed pretty firmly in the realm of digital connectivity. But during that time, the landlords that we know really well have said, like, look, we're developing these smart building strategies. We'd love to know what you think. Really would quite like a smart certification. And we've kind of lent a bit of advice here and there, but we've never fully entered into the process of defining what a smart building is and how it can be useful. At the start of lockdown, we realized that we were going to have a tiny bit more time on our hands, particularly because our clients were going to be at home, so it was going to be easier to interact with them. So we thought that gave us the perfect opportunity to put together the WiredScore Smart Council and start developing, in collaboration with these sort of 50 global landlords and tenants, certification that would try and provide a bit of clarity about what a smart building really is, why it's useful, and why it's important. So we approached a number of our existing clients who had already raised the issue with us in 5 different countries, 6 different countries, and said, do you want to kind of collaborate with us on it? So everyone from Hines and Blackstone and Justine and Patrizia and Legal and General, AXA, and many others. And it's brought together the best of their expertise. I think the important thing about doing it is that we weren't going and immediately talking to the people who are selling smart building equipment. We were talking to people who are using that equipment. And too often in the smart space, the technologists decree that you need to buy their solution for your building to be able to be smart. But of course, that's not true. A smart building is one that delivers the outcomes to the users that the users really care about. And that's underpinned by technology. It shouldn't be technology first and users later. It should be users first and technology later.
I was going to ask a question. What sort of classifies a smart sort of building exactly then?
So we think that there are really four things that users care about in a smart building. And when we say users, we mean both the landlord and, importantly, the tenant.
Yeah.
The first is that the building delivers an inspirational tenant experience. And that's because it allows really high levels of productivity. It's a really healthy building, got really good cybersecurity standards and a few other things, but that all comes in a package of an inspirational tenant experience. The second thing is that the building is really cost effective to run, both for the landlord and for the tenant. The third thing is that the building is really sustainable, that we are being mindful of the carbon footprint of every building, not just in the policies that are implemented, but the actual outcomes of that carbon emissions. And then fourthly, that the building is future-proofed, that it's not going to be a smart building in 2020, but by the time 2023 rolls around and after it's used a new iPhone, it suddenly is no longer needed in the world. So I think particularly there, we emphasize that there needs to be a degree of modularity, so you're not building in hardware that's going to become obsolete pretty quickly.
Yeah. Always important also to maximize value for them who's integrating it. I guess talking of integration, how during COVID, you mentioned more people obviously working from home, your team was working from home. How was it putting a product into these buildings during these unprecedented times? Was it difficult? How did you sort of overcome that?
I think we went through slightly different phases. In the initial phase, because a lot of our work is based on developments and refurbishments, we can actually do a fair bit off plans. So we're dealing with buildings that won't actually start construction for a couple of years. And there we actually found that our work was able to speed up quite a lot because our client teams at homes and their mechanical and electrical engineers were at homes. So they were getting through work faster and getting it to us to review more easily. So that actually curiously speeded us up quite a lot. Then in terms of the process of going into buildings, once the initial lockdown measures were relaxed, it was actually a really good time for us to be able to safely and socially distantly go into buildings and review them when there were very, very few other people in the building. So it made our work a tiny bit quicker. It's somewhat counterintuitive, but we're glad that it was still something that was top of mind for landlords, I think, because so many of them were at home struggling with internet connections and increasingly understanding what the factors were that were going to define the future of real estate. And good connectivity is undoubtedly one of them.
100%. And I guess talking about, whether you're at home or in the office, have you seen an acceleration in adoption, maybe in residential buildings more than commercial? Or I guess, what trends have you seen over the past few months, and maybe any sort of predictions for the future?
Yeah, well, I think we've definitely seen an acceleration in residential. We launched our residential product about a year ago. Jeremy Wright, the then culture secretary, did it. And at that time, we had no idea that this was going to be the world that we were living in, and that your home internet connection was going to be your lifeline into work. So it's clear why there's been an uptick there. I think in the future, as we move towards a model where offices are still really important, but people also do work from home maybe a day a week in a way that they used not to, people will need to rely on cloud-based office systems even more than they have before, which just kind of makes connectivity more and more important, because if you can't have access to all of your shared files, you really can't do anything.
Yeah. I hosted my sort of first webinar from home, and then Zoom kindly sent me, obviously it was like an hour video, and I just spent about an hour trying to transfer this document, which I couldn't with my internet connectivity or on my CRM. And I was just freaking out that all this hard work I'd done was just going to go lost.
Bully me, because one of my favorite facts is that for the average internet outage, your heart rate goes up, equivalent to if you were watching a scary movie. So when you're trying to upload the file and you're not getting in, it's the same as seeing the massive shark coming to attack your boat. You know, it really is breaking the body.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, thank God we managed. Well, actually, I didn't transfer. I actually just kept my computer open and charging till I got into the office 24 hours later, and I didn't want to risk it. And I'm sure everyone's had this issue before. Okay, so what are the sort of big plans? What's sort of next for your product? Obviously, you got the Smart Council. What are they sort of going to be doing now over the next sort of year, maybe?
So we hope to launch our smart certification in Q1 next year. So we're busy with about 40 buildings underway with testing at the moment, which is a really enjoyable process to make sure that we've optimized our scorecard effectively. Looking beyond that, we are understanding how we can expand our geographic footprint. So we're in 9 countries at the moment, and would like to work out, how we can get that up to 20 as soon as possible. Wow. So we've got one country launch coming up in about 4 weeks, which should be exciting, and getting the others in the pipeline now. So we'll be ready for them next year.
Wow, that's fairly big sort of growth plans. Are we allowed to know what these countries are, or is this top secret?
It is currently top secret, but I look forward to coming back on the podcast and letting you know when we're up and running then.
Oh yeah, the follow-up podcast we'll be sure to do. And I guess aside from, talking about the product, talking about your sort of journey in, what was it like going from the cabinet office, 10 Downing Street into a tech startup? I'm sure they both had their challenges, but what was it like to completely parallel types of environments to work in?
It couldn't have been more different. The civil service is 450,000 people, and the public sector is many, many millions more than that. So when you're working there, you feel like you're part of a really big machine. You're working 10 Downing Street. It's been the seat of government for 300 years. And there's amazing history and precedent and tradition. And going from there to being the first person in Europe and the 5th person into a startup was a huge change. Among other things, absolutely, nothing worked because we didn't have systems or functions. So the way I got a laptop was by, just going to a shop and buying a laptop.
Yeah.
And, you realize suddenly that without all those support structures around you, you need to be really resourceful to get something going. So it was a thrilling challenge, but it couldn't have been a more different culture to go from.
And I guess, is there any advice? Obviously, you've done a career sort of change, an environment change. Is there sort of any advice you give for people who are wanting to going into a startup, regardless of whether it's prop tech or fintech? Any advice you could give to the audience listening in?
So I had 3 careers before I hit 30. One as a management consultant at McKinsey, a second one as a civil servant, and then a third one in property technology. And what I've loved is that I've learned an extraordinary amount from all of those things. Each one of them makes me better should I end up back in one of the other 2. I think employers of the future aren't going to want to see someone who's been in the same company, in the same career for 30 years. It doesn't show a breadth of experience and an adaptability that will fit with a changing business world that all of us are going to face over the course of our long working careers. So making a shift into a small startup might seem like a daunting prospect now, but as long as you're confident that you're going to be able to learn from that, and as long as you're confident that you're going into a team who have a growth mindset and care about personal development, there's no way that it won't help you in your career even if it happens that that startup doesn't become the next Google, it will still have been a really advantageous thing for you to have gone through.
Yeah. I think that's a good bit of sort of advice as well for those listening in. Unfortunately, this is bringing us to the end of the podcast. It's been a pleasure kicking off season 3 with you, William. For everyone listening in, what's the best way they can connect with you and, learn more about WiredScored?
I'd love it if you connected with me on LinkedIn or followed me on Twitter at WP Newton. As far as WiredScored itself, please do sign up to our newsletter on the WiredScored Smart Council. We've got some really exciting announcements coming up in the next few months, and it'll be great to have your listeners a part of it.
Awesome. And well, look, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, please follow WiredScored on whether it's LinkedIn or sort of Twitter to hear the updates. And William, looking forward to your global domination. Best of luck with that. And I will catch up with you after the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our special guests. Make sure you visit our website, www.lmre.co.uk, where you can subscribe to our show, or you'll find us on iTunes and Spotify, where all good content is found. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or if you simply just spread the word. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday, and I'll catch you later.
You're listening to a Podcast Company podcast. This was made by Podcast Syndicator, where we help you go from start to grow to making money with your podcast. Let us help you share your message and your voice with the world. Reach out now, Jason at podcastsyndicator.com or Brett at podcastsyndicator.com to find out more. Thank you for listening, and do come back to hear nothing but the best podcasts.